This is just the latest in our webinar series, and we run these events roughly every 2 months, and every other month we have online open space sessions where community tree growers can come along and ask questions and share knowledge. Tonight, we will be discussing climate resilience and community tree nurseries, and I'm very pleased that we are joined with two excellent speakers. So first of all, we'll be hearing from Keith Sakra, who's the director of Barkham Trees, which is the largest container tree nursery in Europe, and he is also a director and co-founder of Treeconomics. And our second speaker is Imam Sayeed, who is the head of plant and seed supply at Forestry England, and is also a member of the Plant Healthy Alliance, which I'm sure will be known to quite a few people on the call. So the format this evening is we'll be hearing from Keith first, and then we will hear from Imam, and there will be a question and answer session at the end. So if you do have any questions for either speaker, you can either wait until the end or pop them into the chat, and we will pick them up at the end. I'd also just at this point like to give a quick shout out for the CTNC crowdfunder, which is finishing on Friday. We're trying to secure the future of these webinars and all the activities that we do. I'll pop a link into the chat, so do consider throwing us a few quid if you can. So without any further delay, I would like to ask Keith to speak to us. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I hope you can see that. I hope you can see the full screen, because very often on these occasions things go missing or appear in the wrong place. So the title of the talk is, as you can see, this question of excuse me, this question of diversity, and through diversity in our tree populations, resilience to the pressures that are going to come because of climate change, pressures that are going to come because of the increased incidence of tree pest and disease, and basically just the general arduous of growing trees in the urban environment. So you have and the question I've got is, are tree nurseries the missing ingredient? So I make no apologies. It's a fairly general talk, but much of what's in this talk will be as much applicable to tree nurseries in the community tree nurseries, as they are to the professional nursery growing, shall we say, thousands of trees. In Barcham's case, something like 120,000 standard trees that are the type of tree that goes into the urban environment in your streets. So hopefully we'll move on quickly. We won't, because so why isn't that going on? Okay, I'm going to do it from here. Good. Okay, so we're looking at diversity on tree populations. And in many ways, planting trees in the urban environment has become very much a numbers game. So it's, let's plant lots of trees and that'll be really virtuous, and it really doesn't matter what trees we plant because we're planting numbers. But actually that resilience begins to disappear when we heavily reliant on one species or two species within our sort of urban tree populations. I'll say that I'm not going to read every word on this, and I'll make the slides available for you afterwards so that you can actually look at them yourselves in your own time. So moving on. So diversity equals resilience in the urban forest. And that's now seems to be a fairly commonly agreed position. But we tend to think of diversity purely in terms of the number of species were, but diversity is like manifold. Excuse me, I'm having problems moving slides on. Okay, but really diversity of tree populations is more than just the diversity of species. The diversity of species is important, but resilience comes from diversity of size, diversity of age, diversity of genetics, and a diversity of public good. What services do those trees provide for the community? And also there's a cultural diversity. So that the diversity we speak about in urban tree populations is not limited only to species. Over the years, there have been many estimations and scientific papers or papers that suggest what the percentage of species within our population should look like. So you can see there's several here. The most commonly used is the one at the top called by Santamore, where he says that no urban tree population should comprise more than 10% of any given species, no more than 20% of any particular genus, and no more than 30% of any given family. What's true is that none of those papers that have suggested the percentage makeup of our tree populations have any real scientific basis. They are opinions, and they're opinions that have been full of long thought processes and lots of research, but there's no science to them. Doesn't make them invalid as guidelines. They're useful, but they're not religious texts that should be sort of followed in the finest detail. And we look on the diversity of size or the diversity of age. Now, age is not necessarily related to size or aesthetics. So what we've got, the photograph on the bottom, at the bottom left, is a picture of me standing next to the Camperdown Elm in Camperdown Park in Dundee. That's the original parent of every Camperdown elm you will find in the UK and elsewhere. And it's hardly a magnificent specimen, but that's it. And the one on the right is, tell me how old is that ash tree? I don't know. But you can see that it's been eroded at the bottom. It's hollow inside. It has a strange shape. Is that a question of age or size? So age and size don't necessarily follow together. But then size can be related to age. This is the Ely plane in Ely. This is the original cross of the two parents of what became London Plane. And this was planted in 1675. And to get some idea of the scale and the size, have a look at the little figure sitting on the lawn to the left of the photograph. It's a massive tree. So that's nearly 350 years old. And to give you some idea of scale, this is a close-up of the tree itself. So diversity of size. And again, there are estimations of what the percentage of trees of different size in the population, what the numbers should be. I think the thing to take home message is the larger the tree, the more ecosystem service benefits that tree delivers. So the more large trees you have in the population, the greater the ecosystem services that are going to be delivered. But that doesn't necessarily make small trees worthless in terms of ecosystem service delivery, particularly carbon capture, but it's the mixture. And I'm going to stress this mixture. It's the diversity within the total population. So here we have newly planted trees, mixed avenue trees. The one in the centre was taken in Stockholm. The one on the right is a single Platanus orientalis. That's in Brive in France. And this is a small tree planted in memorial to a lad that lost his life on the seawater at Seaford. And it was a single tree planted as a memorial tree for him. So the reason for planting trees is hugely varied. So here's a picture of a nursery, and this is Bartram's nursery. And the species you're looking at is Pyrus chanticleer. Now, Pyrus chanticleer is a wonderfully robust urban street tree, but they are all genetically identical. So you have to question the resilience if our population is comprised of huge numbers of Pyrus chanticleer. That's not to say Pyrus chanticleer shouldn't be planted. It's not to say that chanticleer should be avoided, but it has to be part of a balanced tree population. So public goods. So we're looking at public goods identified by HR's government in the early 2000s. And trees contribute to all of these: clean air, thriving plants, wildlife, reduction in protection from environmental hazards, adapting to a mitigation of climate change, beauty, heritage, and engagement with the environment. And it has to be remembered that different species have the ability to deliver those services in different ways and forms. And then we have the cultural. So you have there a worked willow tree. You have a 2,000 or 1,000-year-old cypress in Italy, an avenue of plane in France, a archway of plane in Brive in France. And on the bottom right-hand side, you have what's an Aboriginal tree. And this is taken in the outback in Australia. And the branches where the circling have been trained ostensibly for young Aboriginals to practice their spear throwing. There you have an example in the centre of a pollarded plane tree, which has been sculpted, and some may find it attractive, some may not find it attractive, but it has a significance within the community in which it exists. And the bottom left is an avenue, a conventional park avenue in a park in South London. So we're looking at how diverse the tree population is now. And I think this is quite an interesting thing to be taken into account. All this research would indicate that our tree populations, certainly in urban areas, are far from resilient. So the top one was the 2008 report by Britton Johnson, and that 6 species accounted for all trees and shrubs planted in England's cities, and so on and so forth. But the general overall consensus is that our urban tree populations in particular are not very diverse, heavily dependent on a few species, and are therefore vulnerable should we have a pest and disease come into the UK, or if the impacts of climate change take us in a particular direction. So, having give you a very, very brief, like less than 10 minutes summary of the elements that comprise diversity within our tree populations, I think I want to look at nurseries. And I'm guessing this is where you'll be going, because I think the arguments I'm going to put forward apply to all nurseries, whether community nurseries, whether major nurseries supplying industrial numbers of trees across the UK or across Europe, because there are real challenges. And the real challenges begin with, we have a governmental system which is focused on numbers. So the pressure is on to plant numbers. So a commercial nursery like my own, at this moment in time, given that focus on numbers, can sell pretty much anything, irrespective of what the species or cultivar is. So we're able to sell lots of lime, lots of birch, lots of oak, lots of, and worryingly, lots of small trees like Amelanchier and hawthorn and apple. So, but it's driven by these targets rather than there being any significant strategy that OK says, OK, to make our urban forest resilient, we need to do this, 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 and this. It's obvious that trees need to be planted. It's obvious that we need to plant more trees, but it's moving away from this idea that numbers is enough in itself. And obviously that's the impact on the nursery at whatever level. But what mix of trees are you going to attempt to grow? For Barcham, it's commercially driven. What do our customers want? But I would suggest to you for the tree nursery, the range of trees that a tree nursery, a local community nursery might grow, it's not always going to be the easy choices. It's having a look at the population into which the trees that they produce are going to go. And where are the deficiencies within that population? Which species are underrepresented? Which species, in fact, not present at all? Which species will grow well? And then how do we grow them? And we come back with the targets, you have to ask the questions. How many are achievable? How many targets are a set of knowledge of what is there now? So again, with your community tree nursery, what trees are present in the population that you're serving? Where are the deficiencies? Where are you going to plant them? How many are you going to plant? And I think these are questions, or the type of questions I would encourage you to be asking. And we use canopy cover very often as a metric. We use canopy cover as a way of saying, okay, we have a healthy tree population or we don't. I would argue that canopy gain from planting is not immediate. So to suggest that we are going to get an increase in canopy cover by planting X million trees now, I think is fatuous. It's because we did a survey of trees, plane trees on the embankment in London. And for one Victorian London plane, we calculated just by volume that you would have to plant upwards of 60 conventional street tree sized trees from a nursery. So that's a 60-to-1 ratio. So I think the importance is looking at the trees we already have in the landscape and maintaining those. So the impact on numbers on tree nurseries. So we'll start with the major nursery. Certainly in our case, tree nurseries are rarely consulted about anything to do with the urban forest. We generally decide what we're going to grow and in what numbers in relation to what we sell. Things are actually, one of the problems we have is this question of lead time. So if something is in demand now, the type and size of tree that we're putting into the marketplace, those trees are actually 7 to 10 years old at the time they're planted out in the streets or in the landscape. So we have an enormously long lead time to get trees of that size. And again, it always seems to me, because I do some work with a community tree nursery local to me here, and it always seems to me that it's curbing ambition. What size of tree can we sensibly grow? What size of tree can we put into the community? And one of the things I said to the people who run the nursery is having this idea of having a product. So your nursery actually has a crop that has a place to go when that crop has reached the size it could go out, and handle trees that you can handle and have the expertise to handle, rather than having this idea that you're going to produce street trees. So this is the point I was making earlier. If the demand for numbers alone, tree nurseries can sell almost everything. There's no incentive to experiment, and there's no incentive to introduce new species. And to give you an example, 6 species from Bartram trees accounted for 40% of the total sales in the same 3-year period. And this happens repeatedly. Yet, looking for different species, if people don't ask for them and try them, then there will never be a demand. So Stenocarpus and Spathodia are wonderful trees. They won't grow in the UK at the moment. The one in the middle is Diosporus virginiana. And we do grow Diosporus, but we grow Diosporus, another type of Diosporus, which is not as good as Diosporus virginiana. So the question is, why isn't Diosporus virginiana being grown in the nursery industry? Certainly professionally, there is an annual instability and variation in funding. That means we can't be consistent. So we've got a 7 to 10 year lead time. So at the time we plan production figures, there could be high demand. Yet the time when our crop is ready, 7 to 10 years time, there could be a low demand. So we will be producing a crop against an unknown background. So it becomes a bit of a gamble. And then you'll see here, there's some pictures of things like this Phylocladus. This was pictured at Carswellian Arboretum. Really unusual plant, but it has the capacity to provide a service in the urban environment. Pterocaria fraxinifolia is a tree that is the Caucasian wingnut. It's readily thought of as being unsuitable for streets. So here it is growing quite happily in the streets in Paris. And so maybe one of the challenges, or perhaps one of the real challenges for a community nursery, is how can you perhaps introduce some of these more unusual species? How can you be looking at more unusual cultivars? There are difficulties. One of them is going to be seed, and I'm not going to venture into that area because I know Imam is going to talk about that at some length. But again, there are risks in terms of biosecurity. So for a community nursery, where are you getting your starter material? Where is it coming from? If you're going to be adventurous and you're going to be looking at species that are not present in your existing tree population. And then for the commercial nursery, an unstable market is a deterrent for nursery investment. So this is Bartram Trees. This is Bartram Trees' new infrastructure. These blocks will put in. These blocks will hold something like 10,000 trees. That investment for Bartram is £250,000 just to put that infrastructure in place. And here we have a look at the nursery production cycle. So here's the production cycle for a standard tree, which is 3 and a bit meters tall, single stem. So you go through seed or cutting, propagation. You go through budding. You go through growing on. You grow on to quite a larger size. You transplant. And finally, in Bartram's case, we put them in containers. Again, for the community nursery, where are you going to intercept this cycle? Which part of this cycle can you actually do sensible within the confines of your nursery and your organisation? I'd think it unreasonable for you to be aiming for a crop of trees at 3.5, 4 metres in height. This size, the 1.2 metre high, is perfectly feasible, perfectly reasonable. But what we're already finding is there's skill shortages. For instance, Bartram at one time were looking at propagation. Should we go into plant propagation in a big way? And the investment capital was not a problem. The ground wasn't the problem. The irrigation wasn't the problem. The equipment wasn't the problem. The problem was we could not find a propagator who was skilled enough to be up and running when we put the facility in place. So skill shortages within our industry are huge, and I hope Imam will agree, are in fact becoming worse rather than better. Now I'm having, yeah, great. So real skills gap. For instance, if you look at species like sorbus, mountain ash, or white beam, sorbus again, almost all of them are grafted. Almost all of them are budded onto a rootstock. So here's the budding situation. This is the cutting situation. Here's the seedling situation. And then we look at nurture and development. And here you'll see trees on a nursery where the crown development is completely, it's lost. There's no shape, there's no form, there's no branch structure. The trees in this condition could not be planted in the urban environment. So again, I would ask you to consider as a community nursery, have you got the skills to undertake the pruning at the later stage? Can you create the type of tree that's required in the urban environment? Provenance, and I'm sure this is more Imman's area than mine, but provenance, this is the range of Liriodendron, tulip tree. You can see this is the United States of America. You can see the range of Liriodendron goes almost into the Midwest. It goes up into New York State and goes down into Florida. If you see those trees, as I've been fortunate to do, in their natural environment, they look like different trees. They have different tolerances. They have genetically adapted to the environment in which they're growing. But we have no idea in the UK, certainly in the amenity industry, of where our seed comes from. And again, I think that's it. I know for a fact that's a challenge that Iman's going to address when he speaks. Celtis, same sort of thing. There's the range of Celtis all around the Mediterranean coast up into almost the Italian Alps, right the way down to the Moroccan coast. Nurseries. As a commercial nursery, these are all the folks we speak to. And I'm guessing that you as community nurseries will have access to the same range of people. You have access to so many people, groups of people within society, all of whom will be influential in some way in developing the urban forest. So the nursery becomes not only a plant production unit, but becomes a hub, a place of discussion, a place of setting vision, a place of actually reaching common agreement on what's going to happen to the urban forest and how you're going to develop the tree population in the area in which you live. There's lots of guidance. This is a publication from the Trees and Design Action Group. It's a free of charge download, and it's probably it is the finest, to my knowledge, species selection guide available today. The only thing I would say to you is do not try to print it, because it's something like 770 pages, but it's an incredibly valuable reference document. Native versus exotic. And I'm going to finish on this subject because I know I've been speaking for about 25 minutes now. But if we're looking at resilience in our tree populations, there's a huge argument that said we should be planting native species. There are not enough native species in the UK to produce resilience in our urban environment. And that's, and if you look at the natives, how many of those are already impacted by pest and disease at this moment in time? So ash, certainly, oak, certainly, elm, certainly, salix is not a good urban, certainly not a good urban street tree, and so on and so forth. So I was going to talk a little bit about management and maintenance, but I think I'm aware have done my 25, nearly 30 minutes. So we'll perhaps save this for another day. So anyway, it's been scrambled, it's been rushed. I've tried to cover an awful lot of ground. All I would say to you is I will make these slides available. And I'm quite happy if you use John as a conduit to take any written questions that you have. And I will do my best to answer them, whether it's on the topic of this talk or the topic of community nurseries after this event. So with that, John, I'll stop sharing and pass over to Imam, if I may.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Keith. Plenty of food for thought there, certainly. And you raise a very interesting question just at the very end about native trees. So certainly a lot to consider and a lot to talk about there. Um, yeah, as you mentioned, we won't take questions now. We will have opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And as Keith has said, he's very kindly offered to answer any questions after the event as well, if anyone wants to email them to me. But without any delay, we will move on. And our next speaker, as I said earlier, is Imam Sayeed, who's the head of plant and seed supply at Forestry England. So we will pass over to Imam.
Thank you, John. Let us find out. Trying to share my document. Where has it gone? Oh dear, this is crazy. Just bear with me. This happens at all times. Tally, help me out, please.
There we go. I thought you'd find it.
Can you?
We can see the screen.
Can you?
It appears, yeah, the PowerPoint's just loading now, yeah.
Oops. Yeah, has it loaded?
Just bear with 1 second. Have you pulled up the PowerPoint?
Yes, I have indeed.
Okay. If you just stop sharing and reshare, and it should reload it for us.
Oh, sorry for this.
That's fine. Part of doing things digitally.
Yes, no?
Yeah, can see it. Now just waiting to go into presenter slideshow.
Has it come up?
There we go. I can see it. If anyone else cannot see it, just let me know in the chat. Yeah, cool. Welcome to start.
Thank you so much. Sorry, some technical issues. Thank you, Tali. Okay, so my name is Imam Sayeed, and I work for Plant and Seed Supply, Forestry England, who are part of Forestry Commission. So what we are going to talk about today, introduction about Forestry Commission, just a brief on different FRM material, differences between seed stands, seed orchards, what the future plans are, and hopefully we'll have question and answers. Yeah. By Keith going first on this webinar, he has set the bar very high, and I got I cannot beat Keith. He's a leading figure in the field of forestry, including urban forestry, nurseries, and so on and so forth. So, but I'll try my best, okay, to put a good show. Okay, so Forestry Commission. Also got some, I want this session to be a bit interactive. So we have got, thanks to Tally, we have got a poll for you guys. If Tally could kindly launch the poll, and we'll get some results from that poll And that would be quite interesting to see what the results are saying, about how many people know Forestry Commission, people knowing Conifer Breeding Corp, and so on and so forth. So Tally, if you could please launch the poll so that we can get the results, that would be great. Thank you.
I will launch that now. Let me know, any of the audience, if you have struggle finding this.
Yeah. So whilst you're filling up with, you're answering the poll, I'll carry on. Is that all right? Okay. So Forestry Commission. So in a nutshell, this is just a snapshot of who we are. So we have a chair, Sir William. We got commissioners. We got a chief executive, General Stanford. We have forestry services who look after grants, felling licenses, policy, and so on and so forth. Forest research, by the way, forestry services is the director is Dr. Brown, Anna Brown. With forestry research, they are the leaders in the field of forest research in the international arena. The chief executive, Professor Pendlebury, and we have Forestry England. Our head is Michael Seddon, and I work in Forestry England in a unit called Plant and Seed Supply. I'm pretty sure most of you will know this. So we had Forestry Commission in Wales also until 2013, and from the 1st of April 2013, they created this organization called Natural Resources Wales, in which Forestry Commission have been absorbed. In Scotland, there's no Forestry Commission, but they have FLS, Forest and Land Management, which has been established since 2019. Okay, so Forestry England, we are an executive agency sponsored by the Forestry Commission. We manage 250,000 hectares of land. We provide hundreds of car parks, maintain thousands of miles of trails, and plant millions of trees. We also harvest 1.2 million tons of timber per year. And if you look at that 1.2 million tons, I'll say it's 40 to 50% of the timber which is consumed in England. Plant and seed supply. So we are located in Cheshire. We have an open nursery or a bare root nursery and a container nursery. We produce around 7.5 million trees per year. We also have a state-of-the-art seed processing center at Delamere. And this seed center is one of the largest investments we have made in Forestry Commission, as well as the seed center, the scale of this particular seed center we have, there's only to this such huge scale. Yeah, there's another one in Estonia. We also got a lot of seed orchards, seed stands. Keith mentioned about diversity of species, genetics. He finished on native versus exotic. The word provenance was mentioned a few times. So hopefully, you will I'll try to give a taste of on those things. In this country, so I'm talking about forestry planting, okay? So there are 14 big nurseries, commercial nurseries, and they produce around 160 million trees per year. So FRM categories, okay? This is very important when you are doing one is doing seed related activities. So what are those four basic forestry reproductive material categories? So there are four of them. So if you think about a natural stand, so that can become a source identified material. On the same natural stand, if you were to go and select trees based on phenotype, how they look, and if you were to get rid of the trees which you don't want, depending on your objective, here the objective is timber production. So you keep the straight trees and then you register them, that becomes a select stand. From select stand, once you identify plus trees and put them into a seed orchard, that becomes a qualified seed orchard. After years of work on the material children developed from qualified seed orchard or the progeny from the qualified seed orchard, the geneticists, the tree breeders, we can work out what we call a breeding value. Once we work out the breeding value, it comes under the category of tested material. So for example, tested material in this country, Sitka spruce, Scots pine, lodgepole pine. On hardwoods, oaks are will be from tested category. Qualified material on hardwoods should be silver birch. There are seed orchard of silver birch, sycamore, wild cherry. A lot of work goes on into identifying plus trees, breeding them. And if one starts their career when they're like 20, 25, by the time they see the first rotation done, they will be retired, depending on the species, by the way. And when we talk about genetic diversity, so if you think about it, so if we were to collect seed from natural stand, natural population, and if you were to keep on propagating year after year after year, there is a thing called inbreeding depression. Compared to a natural stand, if we were to identify plus trees from the length and breadth of this country, put them into a mating design, you are enhancing the genetic diversity of the progeny. So when people say by doing seed orchards, you're narrowing the genetic diversity, that's not necessarily correct. As a matter of fact, by having seed orchards, provided you choose the right parents from different locations, the progeny should be much genetically variable. Okay, this is a map of the provenances of UK. So we have got 24 native seed zones, and they're also divided into different altitudes, below and above 300 meters. So now, even if it is a region of provenance, say for example 405, if we were to pick up seed from region 405 from elevation 500 meters above sea level, and if you were to plant them at elevation 50, they will struggle because of the sheer difference in the elevation as well as the differences in the bud burst. Okay, types of seed. Very easy, 3. All the seed which we get in the world, you can divide them into 3 different categories based on dormancy. This is orthodox. Orthodox seed are the seeds which could be successfully dried at a moisture content of 9 to 10%, and you can store them for donkey's years. Breaking the dormancy of orthodox seed is also quite easy. Pre-chill treatment, 6, 7, 8, 10 weeks, depending on the species, job done. Recalcitrant seed. These are the seed which one cannot store them for, say, more than a year. Examples being oak, chestnut. There's also category, what we call intermediate, whereby you can store them for like 2 years, 3 years max, depending on what moisture content you're storing them at. Example, beech, Acer pseudoplatanus, sycamore. So these are the things as part of the community tree nurseries, we need to know when we are dealing with different seed, for how long they can be stored, how to break the dormancy, what are the treatments which are required, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, there are quite a few important bodies in this country who do work on breeding trees. Conifer Breeding Corp, Future Trees Trust, National Tree Improvement Strategy. Recently, we set up a UK Forestry Genetic Resources Group, Professor John Mackay at Oxford University. UK Forestry Genetic Resources Group, the aim of this group is to find common grounds between different nations of United Kingdom so that we can work on species of the future. As we speak, there are like 7 or 8 different lists going around, and that particular group is chaired by His Majesty's Forester Geraint Richards, and the Secretary is Dr. Clay Trivedi. Okay. What are the factors we need to consider for the future? So with Forestry England, we have what we call Species of the Future list, where there are 30 species in the core list. It is going to become 32, to be honest. We were doing some work on it 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then the long list is 63 different species. Keith mentioned native versus exotic. Yes, we need to tap into exotics, make sure we bring the right material, we plant them into seed production areas, find what is good and what is not good from different provenances, and then take them to the next stage of breeding. Provenance diversification. We need to look into climate matching. There's a school of thought. A lot of professors, they believe in going for 2 to 5 degrees latitude. I mean, southern latitude. There's also huge potential to find common ground between different nations, to work on finding species which we can put resources into, because tree breeding is a very, very expensive job. We need to keep Confer Nursery Producers Group, HTA hedging, tree and hedging group involved. Resources, they're not enough, So, for example, we spend Conifer Breeding Co-op, of which we are one of the founding members, £1 million in the last 2 to 3 years under the auspices of Conifer Breeding Co-op. And we identified 250 plus trees of Douglas fir, 200 trees of Norway spruce, 80 plus trees of Scots pine, and identifying and making a copy of a plus tree that can cost between 1,000 to 1,500 pounds. What are we doing as Forestry England to get the seed for the future? So we already established 12 source identified and 27 select seed stands from 13 different species on 330 hectares of land. We're also planting another 18 hectares and a further 16 hectares of seed stands on what we call woodland creation sites funded by DEFRA, and some stands on Forestry England land. We also have quite a few seed orchards. So we have 14 seed orchards in total, covering 55 hectares. We've got 4 Sitka spruce, 3 lodgepole, 4 Scots pine, 1 Corsican silver birch western cedar. We've got aims to plant seed orchards of Norway spruce, Douglas fir. We also got plans to enhance our seed orchards and stands by managing them, making them more productive, registering new stands. We got colleagues working on that. Establishing new seed orchard, as I already mentioned. We're also aiming to have a seed testing lab, which would be approved by Forestry Commission, and in the future, we will go for ISTA recognition. ISTA is International Seed Testing Association. We invested heavily into the seed processing center. We got 2 posts focused on species of the future, establishing new seed stands. There are also funds like TP funds, Tree Production Innovation Funds, which one can tap into. Conifer Breeding Co-op and FTT, which we are part of, benefited heavily from TP funds. As mentioned earlier, we've got plans to set up more seed orchards. This is a slide illustrating how we can cross different mothers and fathers to get the best timber output. So we can breed trees which can be 34% straight. Now, as these trees have been bred for timber, and as we are decreasing the rotation age, the plantation would be much more resilient, as well as the other important thing is 80% of the wood which will be harvested will go into construction. So in this country, we use C16 as a minimum category for construction timber. And as this timber is going to be very, very durable and very, very strong, we're also going to store carbon in the form of timber buildings, in the form of timber used in construction. A quick point just to explain on phenotype. So, phenotype, of course, genotype is important, but more important is the environment. So what I'm trying to say is, if you were to breed or select best of the best tree, but plant that in the wrong environment, it's not going to show phenotype. Different professors, they got different ideas about the actual impact of genotype on a phenotype, but no professors or breeders will say that the role of genotype is more than 15%, 15. So the remaining 85 is the environment. Okay. And please bear in mind, with tree breeding, we can decrease the rotation period. And by doing that, we can make our plantations more resilient. Future plans. So we also got what we call, we are setting up seed production areas. So this is where community tree nurseries can play a huge, huge role. If you got piece of land, what we're after is, and we are doing this on public land belonging to all you guys on this call, taxpayers' land, single species block, hectare blocks. So we'll plant this single species block from the what we call the emerging species. So what will happen from there is, after year 30, 40, depending on the species, we should be able to identify plus trees from those blocks as well as get seed. The important thing is the plus trees, because on the emerging species, for example, Abies alba, Abies amabilis, we don't have enough genetic resources in this country to create breeding population, the base material which we call. Okay, so once we get this base material, which can take 25, 30 years, we should be able to identify plus trees. So if you got this single species block scattered in England, especially on the east, south side of this country, and maybe a bit of central belt of England, in year 30, from those 30 sites, we should be able to identify 30 plus trees to create a breeding population. And from there, another 10, 20 years before we get seed orchards. Now, what is important for this single block hectares, single species block? These are planted at normal forestry stock intensity, which means let nature decide, survival of the fittest, Darwin and classic Mendelian principles. We need to use provenances suitable to sites. We can use guidance from FR, Forest Research. Preference, I think, should be given to UK Select Stand. When we actually collect those plants which are used for establishing seed production areas, they should be genetically diverse. When I say that, I mean they should be coming from 50 to 100 trees and not one tree. Otherwise, we are narrowing the genetic base. Care should be taken to match the elevation of the provenance with elevation of the planting site. Remember, I said about that elevation 500 meters, and if you plant that at elevation 0 or 100, what will happen? We should also look at the performance of different provenances in that east and west of the country. Because if something grows really well in 305 provenance, if you plant that in 405, there's hardly any rain there. There is rain, but not as much as 305, they will perish. And then, if there are abiotic stresses on plants, that's when diseases and pests, they can really go after them. Okay, now this flow chart, I'm not going to spend too much time, but just to impress upon you that on the spaces of the future for the next generation to benefit from, we need to start the work now, creating seed production areas. So I don't know how clearly you can see this flow chart on your screens, but if you were to plant something now in 2025, By the time we have 30 stands and we do identify plus trees or collect seed, it will be 2055. Yeah, 25 plus 30. Yeah, 55. And then from 2055 until we grade the tested seed orchard, that will be another 10 to 15 years. So it's a long-term project, you know. So I call them our ancestor, the likes of Dr. Sam Samuels, who are legends in the field of botany and forestry breeding. They started work on Scots pine, Sitka, Norway, Douglas, and that's how we are benefiting. You know, Dr. Samuels, Dr. Faulkner's. I can hear somebody, Dr. Fletcher's, and so on and so forth. I think somebody's unmuted. Yeah, by the way, Tali. Okay. Now, just an example of cone processing, what we do. So in the last 5 years, we have processed 4.4 tons of seed from 9,000 hectoliters. A hectoliter is 100 liters, okay? We supply seed to the commercial sector. We supplied more than 2 tons of Sitka seed in the last 5 years, which would equate to 420 million plants. We also process cones for Forestry England, Scotland. We're also going to focus on collecting hardwoods and processing them from region 304, 402, 403, and so on and so forth. On the left of the screen, that's our old seed extractory set up in 1964, which was decommissioned this year. This is on the right. This is our new seed extractory. The center has been named after a former colleague who unfortunately passed away, a colleague called Vernon Stockton. This center is going to be called Vernon Stockton Center. Look, at in 1967, there was a gentleman processing cones with proper tie and suit. This is cone processing from 2018. And this is our new seed processing center. Quite a big investment. And this would give us seed for the nation for the next, all being well, touch wood, for the next 100 years. Of course, we need to, I'm not saying those machines will be fit for the next 100 years, but the building should be. It's built out of timber, by the way. Some outputs from our seed extractory. Okay. Now then, what do we need from you? If you see a nice stand, get in touch. We need to focus on spaces of the future. Diversification whilst maintaining timber production is important. We should also not forget about other objectives like conservation wildlife. We should try our best to help talk to Conifer Breeding Corp, Future Trees Trust, National Tree Improvement Strategy, and others. Yeah, forestry nursery women/men, tree breeders, and seed technicians are an endangered species. I say that with a lot of confidence, to be honest, because yeah, finding the right people is very difficult. As Keith was saying earlier, money was not an issue, irrigation was not an issue, but finding the propagators was an issue. And think about a career in these disciplines. I'm pretty sure you're very much interested in seed and plants, and that's why you're part of the community tree nursery group. I should warn, it's a challenging discipline, but one can have an enjoyable life. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Imam. Again, another fascinating talk and lots to consider then. Just to a quick question, there was a question about what's the difference between a seed stand and a seed orchard? If you could maybe just clarify on that, please.
Yes, sure. A seed stand, so it can be a source identified like a natural stand, okay? And select stand is just a bit of improvement on the stand whereby you pick up the right trees, the phenotype, good looking trees. But a seed orchard is a long-term investment. So from the select stand whereby you're picking up the right good looking trees, you go around the country and hunt 30 to 40 plus trees. Then you bring them together after grafting, you make a copy of them, and then you bring them together in a mating design. to enhance what we call pan mix and botany. Okay, I don't want to go into fine details. So you basically you bring, you make copies, you identify the plus trees from a huge range, bring them into a mating design on a seed orchard, and then manage the seed orchard for seed production. Did I answer the question?
Yes, thanks. So I think that the difference is basically a seed stand is somewhere where you can a tree or several trees where you can go to get seed, and then an orchard is where you gather all those different seeds together and specifically use them for seed
Yes.
for seed collection. Okay,
Oh.
thank you. Yeah, there is a again, yeah, thanks very much to both Imam and Keith. Those were fascinating presentations, and as I said, we will endeavour to circulate the slides as well after this talk, because there was a lot of information there, and we're very thankful for both Keith and Imam for sharing that. We'll take a couple of questions from the chat then. There's a question for Keith from Jeannie, who says we have a hi, Jeannie. Good to see you again. A black poplar project where we are growing cuttings from male and female trees. This reduces the genetic diversity for our trees and makes us vulnerable to disease risks. Any advice for how we could improve the project? Very few female trees, etc.
I think you'll find that's a very common problem, which is why people resort to cuttings and cutting material. There is no shortcut in it. It's really can you find male and female and seed in the area? Because you're quite right. If you're producing material vegetatively by cuttings, you're producing a genetic replica of the parent. So I can't add anything else to that. It's a common problem, the fact that the female appears to be very short in supply. So we don't find seed stands.
Did you want to come in there, Emma?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah. So on the black poplar, Poplar nigra, yes, female are very rare. Forest research, they have clonal archives. Okay. If you want to buy, there are certain nurseries, like I used to work for them in the past. Mailer got quite a lot of collection of males and females, as well as Forestart, who are one of the leading seed houses. They also have a lot of material.
Okay.
Okay. We have some Forestry England, but we are going to tap into Forestry Research's clonal archives. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Imam. That's very interesting, and I hope that that maybe helps you, gives you a bit of a lead there, Jeannie. Yeah, a question actually that both of you touched on interestingly in your presentations was on the lack of the skilled professionals, and the question is, what are the routes to entry for the roles and skills that are missing?
Go to work at a nursery. Unfortunately, the major colleges in this country seem to have, certainly the arboricultural colleges, where nursery production and in particular propagation has dropped off the edge. I don't know in this country where plant propagation is trained extensively. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Imam. I find you've either got to go to a nursery and choose your career at a nursery or garden centre and work your way through the process there. It's really difficult. I mean, it's coupled with a general unwillingness in this country, it seems to me, to want to work on the land or want to work outside. It's the way we've now identified trees as being important, but they're trees, like all plants, being part of the horticultural industry, in an horticultural industry that's been undervalued and used as a second class outlet for those who couldn't get a career in anything else. We've allowed the profile and the skill sets that are associated with all things horticultural to become sadly diminished. And there, in my view, there is no quick fix. I mean, how do you feel, Imam? Would that be your experience?
Yeah, Keith, I agree. Yeah, go and talk to local nurseries. There are apprentices routes at level 3 to enter the forestry nursery trade via commercial horticulture. But it's a big commitment on the part of the nurseries. Forestry England, we have apprentices schemes with Cumbria University for foresters. We are working on a scheme for forestry nurseries as well as seed technicians. Seed technicians, at least with nurseries, we have got, the likes of Keith, whereby we can learn, we can just ring him and tap into his brain. But with seed, that is much, much rarer than having somebody expert on nurseries, to be honest. No,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
mean,
dying art.
we've also lost probably the greatest horticultural training resource in this country. We're local authority nurseries. And of course, local authority nurseries have all but disappeared.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also, based on my previous experience, we had students from Cumbria, Bangor, Aberdeen, and I find the sandwich placement, the BSc programs with sandwich placements, really, really cool, because those people, the youngsters or mature students for that matter, they can come for a year, they can work, they can get their hands dirty, learn about seed, plants, but you will be lucky, if you get 1 or 2 graduates per year coming to forestry nurseries or nurseries for that matter. And the remaining 20 to 30 students, they will be going and working for the forestry management companies, including Forestry England, to be honest. With Forestry England, we take 2 to 3 graduates per year on a 2-year placement. Yeah. But yeah, we need to do more. And we also need to do more on seed collectors, I'll say, because that is also very, very, trying to find seed collectors is pain, to be honest.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And we need to use whatever influence we have with the policymakers,
And
look,
it's also, I mean, I sit and look at the programs because obviously Emma and I have talked before. I look at the programs that are in place for forestry, timber forestry, and I'd have to say the amenity sector is light years behind. There is nothing similar in terms of provenance, seed orchards, or anything in terms of there is nothing that replicates the type of organisation that's going into forestry production. So, and when you think of how important our urban trees are to us as well.
Yeah, I think basically just listening to both of you speak there really emphasizes the importance of the work that community tree nurseries do. And the fact that those skills are in a large way being learned on site by volunteers, and the seed collecting is such a crucial part of community tree nurseries as well. I think there's a lot, I think the growth in CTN sector has almost come about because of the fact of the decline in other nursery skills. There's a question from Anthony. What is the minimum number of trees to qualify as a source stand? He then mentions that they have 44 junipers planted in 3 different locations on our 11-hectare site, both clones and seed grown. Dr. Trivedi, who is a member of our local group, suggested the numbers are not sufficient to qualify. So how many more do we need to plant?
Okay, very, very. Keith, should I answer that, Keith? Or?
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely one for you.
Okay, that's a very, very good question. Okay, so now then, different people believe in different things. Okay, but I would suggest at least having 80 plants in one location, 60 to 80. If they're in too many different locations, if it is only like say 10, 20 trees, one can argue there's not enough genetic diversity within those 10 plants. But on junipers, can I just make one more point, Chair?
Yep.
Okay, on junipers, let us be very, very careful. What one can do unintentionally, this is, okay, unintentionally, because of love for juniper, because of indigenous and other things. And if we were to go and collect cuttings or say, for example, seed, there's a very, very high risk that we will unintentionally take the disease from infected tree to uninfected tree. Get me? Before we do anything on junipers, let us send some samples to CSL or Forest Research, and please ensure that particular tree is not infected with Phytophthora ostrocidi. Keith, yeah, is it ostrocidi? Yeah, and then do further work. Otherwise, unintentionally, we'll just spread it, and that has happened, by the way, on junipers.
I think at the beginning, before we started, and sorry, John, I'm stepping in, but Imam wanted to say something about plant healthy.
Yes,
And
plant healthy.
I
Keith
think
is.
I would, whatever you're going to say, I would endorse completely. So I'll let you say it because you brought the subject up. I think if you're thinking about community nurseries, plant healthy certification is one of the things you really ought to be thinking about very seriously. Anyway, I'll pass over to you.
Absolutely. Yes, Keith. Thank you so much for reminding. Yeah. So Plant Healthy Alliance, Keith is, heavily involved with Plant Healthy along with, Geraint and Sir Nicholas Bacon and other members. So is a standard in a nutshell, which should enhance our biosecurity so that, we don't unintentionally or intentionally bring diseases and pests. Now, for the community tree nurseries, I raised this issue yesterday at the steering board meeting and I was having a brief chat with John earlier on, that we should encourage community tree nurseries to join the scheme. Yeah. Now, money can be an issue, but if you were to talk to DEFRA, which I did briefly mention to Dr. Lisa Smith yesterday, Keith, funds can be made available for what they call the group scheme, not we group scheme. So and Keith, Malcolm assured me that we will take that on board. So money should not be an issue. Training, if the resources available, one should be able to, one can have a group of 10, 15 community nursery group colleagues, train them and get those things rolled out. But yeah, strongly suggest joining the plant healthy standards, please.
Thanks, Imam. That's good advice, and certainly that's something that does come up quite a lot for discussion. Is plant healthy, and the one big thing that comes from that is usually the cost, particularly for smaller groups. But hopefully, the discussions that you've been having, and that we can try and push policymakers, then we might be able to make it a lot easier for CTNs to be involved in it, just to increase the biosecurity then for all growers.
Anything I can do to support that, John, please contact me.
That's brilliant, Keith. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and as John, and all being well, once the seed center is inaugurated by Honorable Minister until September, hopefully, and what we can do as Forestry England, maybe November this year or maybe next year, we should be able to host community tree nurseries at our place for half a day or a day, and we can give a crash course on seed as well as some other propagation technique. But Keith has got more experience and expertise on propagation. He's a legend, to be honest, so I need to be careful. But
and as it seems, all your Christmases are coming at once. If you wanted to bring a group to Bartram Trees, I'd happily take the group through nursery production.
Yeah, more than happy for them to get those offers. Thank you very
Well,
much, both.
the invitations there, I can arrange, arrange to host you at Barcham and show you around just how we produce trees, but you might find it informative and useful and pick up things that you can take away.
That's brilliant, because yeah, we are planning to hopefully have some in-person site visits coming up throughout the year. So absolutely, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people on the call would be very happy to go along to either of those sites. So thanks again, both of you, for that. Yeah, well, I think we will draw to a close. Thanks again for to both our speakers for very fascinating talks. Lots to digest there, and lots to think about. And as we said, the plan is to share the slides with everyone after this. And
Okay.
Keith,
Shall we send them direct to you, John?
yeah, if you just send them to me, and then I'll share them with
Okay.
the attendees this evening, or whenever we get them. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. I hope you find this a helpful webinar. Uh, the Our next event will likely be the month, or the every other month open space sessions, which is for tree growers to come along. There's no set agenda; it's just really information and knowledge sharing, ask questions, and yeah, hope to see you there. The details will be shared as soon as that's set up. And yeah, if you do get a chance, please throw a few quid towards the crowdfunder, so we continue to run these events and hopefully get some in-person events at Barcombe Trees or Forestry England site as well. I'll leave it there. Thanks again very, very much to Keith and Imam, and to everyone who came along this evening. And please enjoy the rest of your evening. And
Okay.
good night.
Thank you
Cheers.
all.
Bye
Thank
bye
you.
now.
Keep on the good
Cheers.
working going.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.